Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Caged In Pigcast, where I am speaking to people involved in front of and behind the camera, Michael Sarnoski's drama Pig. I had the absolute pleasure of talking to Vanessa Block, who wrote the story for this, as well as being one of the producers on this fantastic film. If you haven't already, go back and listen to both my conversations with David Nell, fantastic actor who's in a pivotal role with Nick Cage and Alex Wolff, as well as a interview with the editor, Brett Buckman. We definitely touch on some things that would be considered spoilers, so if you'd like to go into this film fresh, I would highly advise that you tune out now, come listen after you've watched this amazing film.
They don't care about you. None of them. They don't even know you. Because you haven't shown them. We don't get a lot of things to really care about.
Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by one of Pig's writers and producers, Vanessa Block. First of all, I want to congratulate you on this fantastic, beautiful film that seems to have garnered all this praise critically across the board. How does it feel to be in the middle of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of surreal quality to it. I think that, for anyone who sets out to make a film that's deeply personal and beautiful to them, the hope is that it will be received with sort of a similar love and affection. And to see that play out has been amazing and really gratifying.
So where did this story come from? Where was the germs of the idea for you and Michael?
Yeah, so we had come upon an article that referenced an old man basically guarding his truffle pig on his porch with a shotgun. And that image really stuck with us, the image of a person who loved their pet so much and was so protective that they would sit outside at night just making sure that no one would come in and kidnap their beloved pet. So that was really the kernel of the idea, but it rapidly evolved into something much deeper and I think more universal, which is this meditation on the commonality of shared, trauma and loss, and our relationship to our mortality.
So obviously, when you give the elevator pitch for this film, did you see the brief synopsis? There's been comparisons to stuff like John Wick and Taken from day one. Were you guys somehow aware of that and excited, because obviously the tone of the film is not that at all?
Yeah, no, the honest answer is that we weren't even thinking in those terms at all.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the initial conceit of the film existed outside of any thinking of who would play the lead actor. So we definitely didn't have Nicolas Cage in mind. We didn't have anyone in mind. Nick came to us through WME, sent the script to him and his team, and he just responded very passionately to the material and joined fairly early in the process. But the script had already been written, so the tone of the film had already been established in the writing long before his involvement. And I think I didn't understand the full scope of his filmography and kind of the cultural awareness of Nicolas Cage. I actually didn't grow up watching many Nick Cage films. So I had to really educate myself after we cast him, on all of the incredible roles that he's brought us. And he's covered so much cinematic ground and played so many different characters. It's insane. But there seems to be this association of him with action films, which obviously Pig is not.
Mm-hmm.
So, people go in with a certain degree of wish fulfillment, I think, in what this film is going to be just based on his association. And I think we've been pleasantly surprised to see that the response to that being subverted has actually been really positive. But it was never our intention to subvert anything. It just kind of was a byproduct of, the script meeting Nicolas Cage.
Well, this is one I've been kind of talking about for ages. I think because obviously, when was this shot? Late 2019, right? Or
Yeah, it was shot we finished, around October, I believe, of 2019. Yeah, because we finished the final day of the edit, just very fortuitously, was the Friday before the lockdown in
Wow.
LA was announced for COVID. So we just managed to squeeze through the edit before everything shut down.
How was that feeling then of just kind of having this finished work and having no idea what's going to happen to it in the kind of world we were living in last year?
That's a really thoughtful, interesting question. I haven't actually really like taken a moment to think about that until now. I guess it I don't think I think we were so like in the momentum of trying to finish the film, and because we finished the edit but we still had to grade the film, score the
Yeah.
film. We had ADR work to do. So I think when you're in, the nitty-gritty of everything, you're so preoccupied by what's immediately in front of you that I don't think that we even took a moment to think about that we might have to sort of sit on this movie for a year while everything shut down. And nobody really knew what COVID was going to do to the
Yeah.
world. So I think we were all under the assumption that maybe this would be, a few weeks and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
everything would reopen. But yeah, we didn't realize at the time
It,
that this would be something to be shelved for so long.
well, it kind of feels like it's a perfect time for it to have come out because, like, I don't know, it feels very refreshing and like because it is that thing of like it isn't the Nick Cage film that everyone expected it to be, and like I I don't want to sound
Mhm.
like a little hipster doofus, but like I think like when I first saw a still of the film, I was like, ah, I think I've gathered the tone of this, and I'm really excited to kind of see the like that more dour and like serious tone that the film has. And when writing the film, how important was it to maintain that kind of I don't know that serious tone that this film has?
Yeah, that was very inherent to the DNA of the project at the writing phase, all the way through every conversation about cinematography with our amazing DP, Pat Scola, who just did a beautiful job, who really approached the film with a background in both smaller independent filmmaking, but then also had done a lot of larger budget commercials.
Yeah,
So he was able to tap into something that felt very visually heightened in one sense, but also very grounded and naturalistic. And our film, tonally, and again, from even the script phase, was very much this meeting of both of those worlds of the high and the low,
yeah,
the natural and the sort of more magical world of the restaurant scene in Portland. So it is an amalgamation of all of those things, and we wanted that to be reflected in the music,
hmm,
in the cinematography, in the production design. So I just feel like everyone really understood that from the script itself. The script was really the blueprint, and just kind of very seamlessly took that baton and ran with it. And I think you feel that cohesiveness in the product. But to your earlier point, I think you were astute to bring up just how you know audiences seem to be really primed for this film right
yeah,
now because of coming out of COVID. And I think that that's a really smart thing to point out, just because I don't know that the reception would have even been this loving if
hmm,
people had seen the film in the pre-COVID era. I think something about the last year and a half being in lockdown has really forced this introspection and like really deep existential thinking
hmm,
that we were all moving so quickly, and it kind of just like forced the brakes on everything. And so I think that has allowed people to appreciate a slower paced film, a
hmm.
film that's very inward, very meditative. And if we hadn't had this period, I think maybe people would have just kind of run right past the movie, or maybe even been frustrated by the slowness of it, but instead they're really appreciating and connecting to it.
Well, I guess a lot of people over the past 18 months have got, yeah, as you said, used to that slower pace of life. Unfortunately, have had to like encounter loss, and but a lot of people as well have
Yeah.
probably found a newfound love for cooking, which is obviously like a beating heart of this film, and like the way that the food is treated is so like loving. And there's an amazing clip that Neon recently put out of Nick like cooking with Isaac Chris. His name's on Pardon?
Yes, Jeff Zarnecki, Chris
Zarnoski.
Zarnecki.
Yeah. And like, so what was the kind of like pre-prep for the film? Like, what kind of stuff what went into prepping it?
Yeah, an enormous amount of work was done actually sort of uncharacteristically and non-traditionally early in the process.
Mhm.
So even before we had financing, because this was a first time
Yeah.
feature, Michael and I had collaborated on a short documentary, which was our first project together. We actually met in college, we're good friends there, and then went on to collaborate on this documentary, which did very well. And that sort of cemented our creative partnership. But this was the first feature that we had done. And so, as any filmmaker knows, people aren't breaking down doors to throw money at first time filmmakers. There's a high risk and a lot of fear associated with that. So it was imperative that we really kind of concretize the vision in a very clear way for the people that would be putting money into the project. So we took a number of trips up to Portland before any money was in place, met with a lot of locals, did a ton of location scouting, took photos. And the food scene was something that we explored heavily at that time and formed relationships with a very prolific local truffle hunter named Jack Zarnecki, whose family, the Zarnecki family,
Mhm.
has restaurants in the Portland area. And one of those people is Chef Chris Zarnecki,
Mhm.
who owns the Joel Palmer House. And from early on, we invited him into the process and he agreed to be our lead chef consultant.
Amazing.
So he met with Nick, as you saw in the video, and taught him proper chopping techniques, really kind of helped get the physicality down because we needed to believe that Nick had this, cooking superpower as this
Yeah.
rock star chef from a former life. And that needed to be really evident in, close-ups of his hands, just the way that he interacted with food was really critical that you felt the authenticity of that.
Mhm.
And to Nick's credit, too, he's a big foodie and has a very, almost sensual relationship with food. He has a real reverence for the art of cooking. So he took to that pretty seamlessly and really embraced the education of that.
Well, everyone I've spoke to who's worked with Nick always says that he comes to a project not only like knowing the script inside out, but always has these kind of interesting ideas of what he wants to do with the character. What was the kind of things he kind of discussed with you guys that he kind of want that he saw in Rob?
Yeah, I think it was almost more that he saw himself
Hmm.
in Rob. And I think that was why he brought such an authenticity to the role. He really stepped into Rob as himself, where he was in his life at that time. I know that his relationship with his cat
Hmm.
was a huge inspiration for him, that he tapped into, the love of an animal friend and kind of the purity of that, human animal connection.
Yeah.
So I think this was very personal to him, and I think we've all been surprised by how surprised other people seem to be that he
Yeah.
would do such an introspective, dramatic role. And again, I think people forget the scope of his filmography.
Mhm.
He's done huge action films. He's obviously famous for that style, but he's done some deeply dramatic roles that
Yeah.
he's been incredible in as well. So in a way, this is a return to that form for him. But he also just, yeah, he knew the script so well. And I think, the material is really where it all begins. And he had almost a reverence for the writing.
Yeah.
He knew every line, not just of dialogue for himself, he knew everyone else's dialogue and he knew all of the action sequences almost verbatim,
Mhm.
and was very loyal to the writing. So I think that was a big piece of what he brought as well.
Well, I was fortunate enough recently to speak to David Nell, who has that
Yeah.
fantastic
Yeah.
scene with Nick and Alex, and he attested to the script. He said it was a beautiful like yeah, a beautifully written like script, and that I don't know, like
Mhm.
it just conveyed like from reading it, you just got the tone of what the film was.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what one of the other points I wanted to talk about is obviously you have this central relationship throughout the film that is between Rob and Amir. How
Mhm.
important was it for you guys to make sure that that kind of dynamic between those two actors, like, was there like, did you, I don't know, was there any concerns that like obviously that those two wouldn't gel? Because I know that they've kind of there's photos of them. They look like they've become the best of friends. And I know that Alex has said that Nick is his favorite actor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think initially there was no expectation. We had hoped that there would be, purely on a creative
Yeah,
acting side, we felt that there would be a really fun alchemy that could exist between those two men as actors.
yeah,
I don't think we could have ever have anticipated that they would develop this really fun friendship, which they did. I think Alex Wolff has an obvious admiration for Nicolas Cage as an actor. And a lot of that is felt even in his performance as Amir in relation to
yeah,
Rob, the character. And I think that played really well because Rob in the film exists in these kind of mythic proportions. He's a man in that kind of classic noir sense. We don't really know what his backstory is. It's a slow peeling back of those layers. And Amir, who, is very frustrated by him and annoyed by him, also has this kind of awe for him. And that was what Alex Wolff felt towards Nicolas Cage. So we got just really lucky at every stage of this. And I think, you just kind of have to go into these things making the best decisions you can with the information you have. And magical things happen sometimes. And they did on this film.
well, it's a film that very much feels like everybody is working to the same goal, like, and that, like, even, yeah, even like the small characters, like I mentioned, David Nell or kind of Darius Pierce, or even Adam Arkin, they've got these tiny, like, do you know what I mean, the tiny amounts of screen time, yet make
Mhm.
such a large impact on the film. And like, I guess one of the things that's very interesting about this film is it's a very male like story about like, but it has this like the loomingness of the female characters, whether it is kind of Rob's wife or um Adam Arkin's cat, yeah, Amir's mum, or even Brandy herself, the pig. Like, what was the kind of discussions around that when, like, in the script? Was there like that thing of, I don't know, yeah. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I mean, it's something that I'm very passionate about and is very important to me being a female filmmaker
Yeah,
and definitely being, central on a film that was fairly male dominated, at least optically and whatnot. I think it was really important that, the feminine spirit, if you will, whatever that means exactly, was made manifest in the film and was, part of the central driving force of the film. And I think that energy, however you want to define it, is felt in kind of every department of the movie. I think it's felt musically. It was important to us that this sense of the ghost of the feminine, which is the thing that, all of these characters have really lost and are grappling with, be felt. It's felt in the sensitivity of the cinematography, the intimacy of that. There's a certain, you know, internal, meditative, sensitive quality to this film that pervades all aspects of it. And I think, again, people go into the film both because it's externally male driven with male characters, and also Nicolas Cage, has traditionally done a lot of roles that I guess on their face feel very quote unquote masculine. And
uh-huh,
again, whatever that means, because I don't even know how you would define that, but I think it's part of our cultural kind of collective understanding of what those terms mean. So there's an expectation that it's going to be one thing, and when it subverts that and becomes something much more sensitive and kind of soft in a way, I think that surprises and interests people.
definitely, definitely. So like, to kind of go back to Portland, like, how integral was that in the script? Because the film, to it feels like it's another character, right? It's kind of like Portland is like a character unto itself. So how integral was that in the script, or was it written like that, or
Yeah, absolutely. So again, excuse me, tonally, the film definitely walks this tightrope between something very grounded and naturalistic and something very magical and heightened.
yes,
We wanted the film to feel, almost not quite to the extent of magical realism, but we wanted it to have this fable like storybook
mm,
quality to it. And you feel that through the chapter markers, and you feel that through the movement through these various realms, where we encounter, as you pointed out, kind of these small but very memorable characters
yes,
that exist almost as these gatekeepers. And we very much wanted this sense that if you were to explore each of those side characters, that it would open you up to an entire sub community, that each one of those people in and of themselves could be their own film. So that was all very intentional. And Portland as a place plays such a pivotal role in that, because grounding that magic in actual spaces that exist that people can go visit was critical, and also kind of heightens the magic even more. So everything that you see in the film is an actual location that one can go to. You can eat in those restaurants. You can explore those neighborhoods, all of that, which is pretty cool.
What was the kind of vibe like on set? Was it like yeah, because it was what, 20 days shoot? Like that sounds, it's crazy,
Okay.
right?
Oh my God. Yeah. You're taking me back now, like, 2 years,
PTSD.
whatever. But I had forgotten those nights. Yeah, those were tough days. The vibe was just super loving and positive. Like, look, I take issue with even the terminology that we continue to use in the industry of like above the line, below the line. I feel like that's a conversation for another time. I think there's something inherently offensive and disrespectful about that, because a film is a family.
Yeah.
The crews, like literally you cannot make a movie without every single person that shows up every day and gives all of their heart, souls, and minds to this process. I mean, the Portland crews gave so much, were so artistic, thoughtful, respectful, kind. I just can't say enough positive things about the experience of working with that team. And they really made the movie. So I think you feel the love and affection that everyone brought to the process in the product. And the beauty of filmmaking is that I think that those things are inextricably linked, and corporations maybe, or people, the suits, if you will, try to unlink those things and believe that you can have this top-down approach and still make a great film. And I don't think that you can. I think that you feel the disconnect in the product. It's this very tangible thing. And when there is that connection and that family kind of respect, you feel that in the product. And we're experiencing that with this film.
Yeah, I'm not sure how true this is. Obviously, I read it on IMDb, but it's reported that Nick took a lot of the cast and crew to watch Parasite whilst filming. Did
Yeah,
that happen?
that did happen. Yeah, we saw Parasite together, and it rocked all of our worlds at the time. Yeah, it was unbelievable film.
At that point, did you know that Neon would distribute the film, or was it kind of
No.
kismet that
Yeah,
happened?
yeah, that's crazy. I had never made that connection. Yeah, I guess it was prophetic in a way. How funny.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Were there any like standout days, like scenes that were kind of, yeah, like like magical to watch, like, or kind of like were yeah, were there days that kind of stood out to you of like, we're making something special here?
Yeah, I think the final encounter, between Adam Arkin and Nick in the office was one of the days that I felt a lot of magic in the room, when Nick breaks down after the news is delivered of what happened to the pig. That was a day that I think you could hear a pin drop. He gave so much of his body and heart to that moment. That was a very magical day. A lot of the scenes, oddly, and I know Adam isn't in the film too much, but there was something very powerful and electric about the dynamic between Adam Arkin and Nicolas Cage. And Adam was actually a pretty late hire in the process. We were in a bit of a bind. We didn't have an actor for that role. And I had seen Adam Arkin in A Serious Man, the Coen brothers film, and thought, even though it was a small performance, it was so memorable and incredible. And he had such a charisma, and there was this naturalism to how he read dialogue. And so I felt like he would be perfect for the part, and brought him in, and we were lucky enough to get him. So he showed up very late in the game and just fit again seamlessly into this puzzle that had already been established. He felt like the missing piece. And you could feel that chemistry in the scenes that he did with Nick. So for me, those were memorable days. Yeah, I think those were probably the most memorable.
Perfect. So to kind of backtrack a bit, what was the initial feeling when you found out Nick was going to be on the project? I guess, like, as you said, you didn't really have that reverence, or not reverence, but didn't know his back catalogue as well as nerds like me. But like, was it still you must have like been like this? Nick Cage is a big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it was a surreal moment for sure. Just hearing that, a star of his stature wanted to do this tiny little film and not only wanted to do it, but clearly had this passion for the material.
Hmm.
So, no, it was incredibly affirming, exciting. Um, I think we were just over the moon about it and also very quickly knew that we wanted to lock him in and just kind of build the schedule and the film around his involvement in the process. He became very central to it.
It very much feels that, and now that the film's out, and obviously a lot of people are commenting on the fact that there is this parallels between Nick's career, whether it's like that kind of period of his career where he kind of was metaphorically in the wilderness of Hollywood. Do you know what I mean? He kind of had that heyday that a lot of people would say in the 90s. Is that something that like came into your heads whilst you were working on the film, or is it kind of now that people are pointing it out? It's like, oh, that's a great bit of, again, like kismet, kind of like the stars aligning for the film.
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter. It was, again, I don't think much of this was a conscious
Hmm.
thinking. I think in a way when it becomes conscious, it sort of loses its magic.
Yes.
So those things kind of can't coexist in a way. And so luckily we weren't thinking consciously in those terms and the magic just followed that. But no, I mean, and again, I think all the choices that Nick has made in his career have been very purposeful.
Hmm.
I think there's an unfairness to how some people have approached his work, where they're not seeing the larger context of the body of work that he's
Oh yeah.
done and how it kind of has moved in these waves. And again, I think Pig is just yet another chapter in a pretty remarkable career. And for people like yourself who are obviously super fans of his, I think you get it. But yeah, no, it's an amazing. It's a return to not necessarily an overarching form. It's a return to one specific form of many that I think he's really capable of.
Yeah, it almost feels like a film that he couldn't have done without the career before him. That was the kind of, do you know what I mean? It's that thing of
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. And again, just because the role is so internal, I think it required an actor who had a certain electricity
yeah.
that was always riding underneath the surface. Because for anyone else that doesn't have the background, the cultural weight, if you will, behind them, I think, I don't know that you would have felt enough of that magic and power underneath the surface. But there is something, we're always waiting for him to kind of break out, if you will. And that creates a really interesting entropy in all of the scenes.
So what was it about the the world of fine dining that kind of excited you and made that like the kind of world in which you draped the story around?
Yeah, I think it was a context that offered a lot of interesting exploration of kind
Hmm.
of the underground, if you will, and
Yeah.
both like truffles as a commodity and also the restaurant scene is cloaked in a certain magic. It's almost as if people haven't been able to get a full glimpse behind the curtain. So I think we were interested in exploring, the darker underbelly of that,
Hmm.
elements of the hypocrisy of that, elements of the humor of that. Obviously we take creative liberties and a lot of it is very heightened. We're not pretending like fight clubs for restaurant workers necessarily exist. Although when we were in Portland on an initial scout, we went to a molecular gastronomy restaurant and met with the chef there. And we asked him kind of offhandedly, what do you do in your free time? And he's like, I like to hit the shit out of a punching bag. And we were like, yes, that's how you burn off your energy and frustration in the kitchen. And it totally fit in with this underground fight club that we had created. So yeah, I think it was really rife with a lot of interesting opportunities to kind of delve more deeply into that.
Well, with all the restaurants I've ever worked in and stuff like that, I think the film perfectly does capture this danger that like that chefs kind of have, that they are like these almost like wild men of cooking. Do you know what I mean? Like these weird artists who, and I think like
Yeah.
that's what the film beautifully captures. And I know that it's again like speaking to Brett Buckman, the editor, that originally like this was a much longer film than it was. Like, was it difficult to cut it down to like the length it was, or was it like Killing Darlings, or was it like this is perfect as it's turned out?
I mean, the editing process for us was really a discovery. I mean, I think the script, again, was a very strong blueprint for what we wanted to do. And
Mhm.
ultimately, I think everything that existed on the page you feel in the final product. So even though it went through an intricate discovery phase in the edit, it was almost more of a return to the initial intentions. And I
Yes.
think, like, for me anyway, it was very important to stretch the film to the limits of its potential in the editing process. So I'm a big believer in taking a lot of risks in the edit, kind of, breaking something apart only so you can put it back together in its most beautiful form. So yeah, the edit, and I'm sure Brett talked about this, was stressful. We went through a lot to get it to this place. There was a lot of conflict and fights and yelling and all sorts of things, lovingly, of course. But yeah, to get it to this place. But in terms of length. I mean, we definitely had a longer version of it, but this just felt like the most essential, elemental version of the film that really kind of took the best of it and wove it together in a way that felt true to the initial intention.
Well, when watching it, I kind of realized there's that pivotal scene with Chef Finway that kind of happens like at the exact middle point of the film, like near enough. It's like the 45-minute mark, and it feels perfect. And obviously, it's interesting that Brett directed it, edited it, having
Mhm.
like kind of worked on another Nick Cage project with Mandy. That kind of like
Yeah.
this film beautifully feels like again, it feels like kismet because it's like they're almost like two sides of a coin of this
Mhm.
exploring like grief and loss. And I've flippantly like joked to Brett that he's almost edited the Nick Cage Man of the Woods like trilogy with
Mhm.
Mandy, Color Out of Space, and now Pig. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
there's
Brett.
not really a question in that, is there?
No, Brett, it's an opportunity for me to sing the praises of Brett Bachman, who was amazing to work with, so incredibly patient, so thoughtful in his approach. He came to us through, yeah, we loved Mandy, thought he did an incredible job. And I don't think we were even connecting the Nicolas Cage dots. And it's sort of funny that he's become a little bit of the de facto Nicolas Cage editor, I guess, is how we've referred to him. But yeah, he was just an amazing, very measured approach. Really like helped us experiment and again stretch the limits of the film. Was always willing to go to places that we had no idea if they would work, but we always wanted to try it. So there was a real beautiful freedom to experiment
Mhm.
in the editing process, and he really provided the framework for that. So just yeah, can't say enough good things about Brett Bachman.
At what point did Alexis and Philip come on in regards to the score? Because I'm always interested to know, like, was there temp score used for this, or like, was there an idea of how you wanted the film to sound early on, like even like script writing? Was the film written like with music in mind?
The film was written with a lot of silence in mind,
Hmm.
honestly. Again, going back to that kind of initial tone that we imagined for this, it was always something very meditative, internal, silent, a lot of sound design, because obviously the soundscape of the forest is so
Yeah.
rich and immersive. And that was really important to us, again, to feel the movement of this character through different realms. And so we wanted the realm of the forest, which is where he's, holed himself up
Mhm.
and removed himself from the world, to have its own auditory experience. Once he leaves that behind, there's something very invasive about the mechanical sounds, the sounds of
Mhm.
commerce, the sounds of the city. So, he's overwhelmed by that. You see that in almost this hallucinogenic sequence as he's driving into the city with Amir. as the bridge is passing over his head, we wanted it to feel that this was a man that was being totally overwhelmed by this journey out of, reclusive living
Hmm.
into this world of the city. So the sound of the spaces was very important to us, and figuring out how to interweave that with a score that would heighten the emotionality of the film without drowning it in sentimentality. All of that was a discovery. Very long conversations. We put our composers through so much. They were incredible. Really trying to find what the vibe of the music would be in the edit. But to your initial question, we actually cut the film dry initially. So no
Oh
temp
wow.
music on a first cut. The composer Alexei Grapsus came into the process fairly early, and looked at a dry version of the film, and it was more of conversations about the direction of the music than it was us forcing temp into the process. So that gave him a lot of freedom to bring his own creativity. And then Philip Klein as well, who came on a little bit later in the process as well, who was just amazing to work with. So yeah, I just felt like the composers allowed for a lot of experimentation,
Yeah.
and were really patient with us as we found the sound of the film.
That's really interesting to hear that it was edited dry, because
Yeah.
it allows the film to kind of have those moments of quiet, and I think that's what that yeah, that's where this film shines, especially again with that baggage of a Nick Cage. Like, you watch a sizzle reel of Nick Cage loses his shit, and this film, you don't get that, and it's the quiet moments that make it such a beautiful film. Another thing I always like to, oh sorry, no, you go.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say to that silent thing, the silent approach. I also just think Nick Cage as a man, as a human being, like outside of acting,
Hmm.
is a very introspective and highly intuitive human being. And so there's actually that kind of silent introspection is innate to who he is. And
Yeah,
so again, I think it was more about him just embodying Rob as a character, as himself in a way, as his kind of true self.
yeah.
So that's very connected to just who he is, which I
Hmm.
don't know that a lot of people know about him, but there is something very subdued, quiet, and intuitive
Yeah,
about him.
I know that he said like the film Joe is very much like that's the closest at that time that he felt like he'd played himself, and this very much feels like a companion piece to that. And it's I know that
Absolutely.
David Nell said that um he didn't know what to expect from Nick, or like going in, and like obviously I would say like if anything David manages to do what would like be like a quintessential
Yeah.
Nick performance, like the kind of the ticks and the kind of, I don't know, going out there when it needs to be.
Bigger than Nick, bigger performance than Nick in that scene. It's kind of funny. Yeah, he out caged Cage, right? I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you've got the actors on board and stuff like that, it's I always like to know, was there any like films or kind of literature or anything like that that you kind of said to them like, hey guys, check this out, like this may give you like an idea of the tone we're going for on this.
Yeah, it was not as much on comp films, honestly. I mean, we had some things in mind where there were shades of films, but this really was kind of its own
Hmm.
unique thing. I think that we had some tonal references. Obviously, like we're big fans of the Coen brothers. I think there's elements of that. They do this kind of the magic and like the moving through realms where each, secondary character feels like its own character in a film,
Yeah.
its own protagonist in a film entirely. So there was that sense, but it was much more, I think, the references that we gave were just, references of Portland, the space, talking about our intentions of cinematography and tone. So, yeah, we didn't have too many specific film references for this one.
Amazing. I'll ask you, just one last question before I let you go. Is why Bruce Springsteen's "I'm on Fire"? What was it about that song that like, yeah, why was that song chosen?
Well, I think initially we had talked about other songs. I mean, this was something that came to us both as a function of a creative choice, but also budgetary
Mhm.
restrictions. We're a tiny movie, but I think we felt creatively that there was a beautiful, again, feminine quality to it. It's a film about love and passion, and Cassandra, who did the final song, she both played guitar and sang, brought such a spirit and a soul to the performance. And so when she did this acoustic version of it, we felt like that really, it felt like the type of song that a lover from your past would sing and
Yeah.
like record for you. It had a melancholic but sensual, lovely, feminine soul to it. And it just really felt right. It's funny because a lot of with music we found throughout the whole process, both for the score and for the final song, it's, like, almost impossible to articulate.
Mhm.
Music is like it's this thing that just exists outside of language, like, how do you even I'm struggling to even answer the question because it was just so felt, that
Yeah.
it was right, and I don't even know how to exactly put it into words. I mean, that's probably my best attempt, but it just felt right is
Yeah.
the answer.
Yeah. It kind of perfectly like it's one of those things as well that really makes you just want to sit through the credits as well, because it is this beautiful
Yeah,
rendition. And I love the fact that even after the song finishes, you kind of it goes back to that sound design of the forest and stuff like that. And
yeah.
it's kind of, I don't know, it feels like the film you're given this peek into Rob's life, and then like you can only hope that he finds happiness somewhere down the line.
Yeah, no, ever since we recorded I'm on Fire with Cassandra, I to this day, we're 2 years almost after finishing the film, and I'm still singing it in the shower.
Amazing. So like I know in like movie making stuff like that, it's always impossible to talk about what's coming up in the future. Do you have any plans to work with Michael again, or are you kind of just basking in the kind of joys of having released this amazing film?
No, we're doing a lot of work actually. We're basking in simultaneously.
Amazing.
Yeah, so for us as a collaboration, we have a television show that we've developed that we're just beginning to put together, based on a true story of an amazing man that we met who has extrasensory perception. So very much a character study about his life story, which is really unique and fascinating. And then another project is a science fiction film that
Amazing.
I'm going to be directing. That is very much a labor of love. It's female driven, socially conscious science fiction that we hope to bring back to Oregon,
Amazing.
to
Well,
shoot in Oregon. So yeah, a lot of cool things in the works. Riding the wave of basking in this amazing film, but also wanting to continue creating.
mhm. Amazing. Well, I can't wait to see what you guys do next, and I'm sure I speak for loads of other people. It's as I'm sure you're aware, the kind of the general consensus for this film seems to be that like people love it, and it's I can only imagine what that kind of feels like to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm just thrilled for everyone who gave so much to the
Mhm.
project, and it's amazing to make something that feels like it's moved and had resonance with people around the world,
Yeah.
honestly. Like you're pretty far away and we're speaking now and you you seem to really love it. So there's nothing more gratifying when you pour yourself into something to feel it being received this way. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've kind of been end up like living and breathing this film somewhat, kind of talking to loads of people involved, and
Thank you.
I find myself walking in the woods, like listening to the soundtrack for my like daily like kind of wander out of the house, and it's yeah.
Can I ask you a question? I
Yes, of
wanna ask
course.
you what do you think, in the film you've connected so strongly to? Because it's obviously really affected you.
I think it is that thing of like loss, and I always like I had a similar reaction to Mandy in that thing of like not even like to do with like loss as in the death of somebody, or kind of just that like deep feeling of losing something. And I think the I don't know, the existential feeling that Rob has, like that central speech he gives to Chef Finway just really resonates with me, because I'm always like, I don't know, like there's something about that kind of like meaninglessness to it all, and the way that like, yeah, Rob says to Amir as well, if I hadn't gone searching for what like for the pig in my mind, it could have still existed. And it's like, yeah, that like that kind of really nails yeah, there's just perfect kind of summations of these deep feelings that I guess a lot of us have. And yeah, like I'm really connected to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the commonality of that,
Mhm.
obviously, because so many people are connecting to it. So it speaks to how this is really like these stirrings exist within us. And I think they transcend gender, race,
Yeah,
creed, all of it. It's the human experience. You know, we're
definitely.
all going to have to live through loss,
Yeah,
both loss of loved ones and loss kind of our own lives. You
yeah,
know, that's the reality of being mortals. So I think, yeah, it's tapping into something very deep in people. And that's exciting because you hope that cinema can be this bridge where, you know, it sort of transcends those barriers and you know, becomes an experience that we can all participate in and hopefully bring us closer in the commonality of that.
and
So what an amazing thing to be able to be a part of bringing something like
yeah.
that to people. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that the film really highlights as well is kind of where, like, who are you going to become in your life? Like, how are you going to deal with this? Are you going to become Rob, or are you going to become um, Adam Arkin's character as well? And I found that is just a really fascinating thing, especially like I've got a very young son, and I'm always like that thing of like, oh, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of little crossroad moments, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's so
absolutely.
that, yeah, as you mentioned, there's so much in this for everyone, and as much as like as you said, a lot of what you see on screen is a male protagonist, antagonist, and stuff like that. It's universal. I think it will speak. Well, it already is speaking to a lot of people, but I guess as it starts to open up in different countries around the world, that kind of ripple effect will be seen.
Absolutely. That's the hope for sure.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. What a lovely interview. Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again to Vanessa Block for her time. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it was a fantastic and insightful interview. And you'll probably be aware that I was kind of thrown off when Vanessa asked me that question about my opinions on the film. I don't know. I didn't expect that. And to be honest as well, I was slightly hungover when we recorded this chat, but I don't think that takes away from it. If anything, it probably makes me a little bit more vulnerable and, yeah, made for an interesting conversation. For US listeners, you can now watch Pig on VOD, so you'll probably be able to find that everywhere. You'll normally be able to rent stuff. UK listeners, we've only got a few more weeks to wait until the 20th of August. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Acast, or wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. As always, I've been Petrus Patsilivus. I've been looking for a pig, and I'll catch you next time.